Hello, my name is Paul Moyse. There I am. And I'm a very bad person. I've ruined lives. And I've made people cry. Children, in fact. I've made children cry. But what is my crime? I am a caricature artist. So my problems began in 1973, when I was encouraged to draw by my parents. Little did they know the monster I was going to become. Skip forward around 20 years, and I would be drawing things like this. I would sit in front of spitting image and copy what I saw. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. Skip forward another 20 years, and I still don't know what I'm doing, but now I'm getting paid for it. So I draw high-quality, fine art caricature for private individuals, and I teach the art of caricature to my students all over the world. So, why do I draw caricature? I draw caricature to get a reaction. And it's this reaction that fascinates me. I love to explore what makes people tick, and how our subconscious can give away our personality without us even knowing it. And it's my job to pick up on that. But on a more superficial level, I look at the features of my subject that make them stand out from everyone else. In this case, my own. And I'll exaggerate those features for comedic effect. That's what I did to myself. So when I'm drawing other people, it can be a very powerful tool, because it gives me license to say, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think of you, and not only are you going to laugh about it, but you're going to pay me for the privilege as well. I don't know many jobs where you can do that. But why do we, as human beings, connect with caricature in the way that we do? Why do we laugh? And how is it that a caricature can be more recognisable than a portrait? Well, our perception of ourselves is always very different to how other people see us. And when we're presented with that information in an honest way, which is what a caricature does, then that can be a shock to the system. And that shock can give rise to other emotions, such as horror or laughter. But what you might not realise is that you are actually a caricature artist as well. We all are. So let me explain that. Have you ever wondered how your brain can catalogue all of the faces it sees every day, and then recognise in an instant a face it hasn't seen for years? Well, that doesn't just happen. There has to be a process for that. Well, the key to that process is in our memory. Our brains latch onto ideas far more easily than they do detail. And it's a much quicker recognition system. And it's much more efficient for processing those huge amounts of visual data. So, if someone looks like an animal or a banana, for instance, then our brains will reference that image as a concept, rather than what's actually there. And a caricaturist has taught themselves to trust that instinct over reality. And all that's left to do then is to transfer that image from the mind onto the page. And if you're teaching yourself, then that can take years of practice. But a good caricature isn't just about turning someone into something we're more familiar with. Just doing this alone would make for some fairly boring caricatures. We have to inject some personality. Whatever that personality may be. So a caricaturist has to be able to step inside the mind of the person they're drawing, but at the same time be aware of how other people perceive that person. So if it's someone we've met, or we've known for a long time, that job can be fairly easy. We've got a good visual reference of who they are. We know their mannerisms and how they talk. But if it's someone we've never met, such as with a celebrity, then we have to try a lot harder. We can't just give them a call or pop round their house, unless we're a fan of restraining orders. So we have to use all the resources we have available, which these days is the internet. So how do I start a caricature? What am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for an expression that fits my subject's personality, which I can then exploit. So let's go through a little demonstration of that process. Here is someone you may or may not know, a certain gentleman called Mark Binns. So you might know that Mark is the lead organiser of this event. He's generously agreed to be the subject of this experiment. So the first stage of any caricature is to find the right reference. And when, providing I've got permission from my client, my first stop would usually be social media. So thanks to social media, we can collect a lot of information about someone really quickly. And before I started this caricature, I didn't know Mark. But through Facebook, I had an instant visual collection of who he is and how to exaggerate it. So in terms of his personality, I could tell he was a very social person with lots of real-life friends. And he was always actively involved in something. And there was a distinct lack of selfies, which suggests to me that he's quite a selfless, altruistic kind of guy. So I wouldn't draw someone like this looking sad, for instance. That's my first clue. So scanning through his photos, I started to notice that there were 4 key features that were jumping out at me. There was a big nose, some huge puffy lips, a Kirk Douglas chin with that big dimple, hiding with a beard very well there. And finally, there was this recurring expression of comical surprise. So that's a key feature. So if my caricature was going to tell the story of Mark in an effective way, it needs to have all of these 4 elements. So I needed a new reference. Not just for resolution or lighting, but one that captured all of my observations in one shot. So I needed to pose my subject. And with Mark, I was doing this remotely via email. So I would write down suggestions for lighting, pose, and expression, and he would go off and take some photos. So the first set of shots he sent back were very professionally done, but they weren't quite what I was looking for. Firstly, the lighting was very flat. It didn't show off the forms of his face. I was looking for more of a high contrast between light and shadow. But secondly, and more importantly, I was missing some of the silliness and sense of fun that I saw in his Facebook profile. Generally, I thought the expressions here were a little nervy and quite forced. I didn't feel like he was showing me who he really is. And I can understand if there was some apprehension on Mark's part, having never been drawn before. I'd be scared too if I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. So, with a few more directions for lighting and pose, and a few reassuring words, Mark went off and took some more photos. And these were so much better. So the lighting's better, and Mark's starting to relax, and the hat has added an element of fun, and that's helping Mark relax as well. And I'm starting to see the silliness and sense of fun. And this reference in particular, I felt had the highest degree of silliness, and there's that comical surprise. And it had all of the other elements I was looking for as well. So with a few adjustments in Photoshop to the contrast and the colour, I had my final reference. So the next thing to do is to draw it. So I would pick up my pencil and do a pencil sketch. So if I'm happy with my pencil sketch, I'll transfer this into a painting software and then paint it. So this is much like I would try and recreate the experience of painting in oils, but in a computer. So I'll try and stay true to my traditional process as much as I can. So after many hours of painting, we arrive at our final caricature. And there he is. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm pretty happy with the end result. And according to Mark, his girlfriend found it hilarious. So, job done. What if I was to draw one of you right now? How would you feel about that? Nervous? Excited? Excited, right. I can talk to you later. So, if you're one of the nervous ones, then don't worry, I'm not going to draw anyone today, so you can relax. But why are we scared of having our character drawn? What's there to be scared of? It's just a drawing. Well, humans generally have a problem accepting the way they look. And it's a daily problem that we all go through, myself included. And many factors can influence us. There's media, peer pressure, sudden change in our appearance. But the biggest and most damaging thing we can possibly do is to compare ourselves to others. And caricature aims to break that down, because caricature celebrates our differences. So, because the more we worry about how we look, the less we're going to be focused on the job in hand. And there are only so many ways that we can change the way we look. There's clothes, hair, makeup, before we have to resort to more drastic changes, like plastic surgery, paper bag over your head. At some point, we have to accept the way we look. It's inevitable. And it's only by doing this that we can lessen the fear of having a character drawn. So, if you've got a hook nose, then celebrate that hook nose. Or if you suffer from male pattern baldness, celebrate that male pattern baldness. Because the truth is, no one cares. Everyone's just worried about how they look. And think about what we're fighting against. Genetics. And much like my previous examples of John Renaud and Alfred Hitchcock, there are many other celebrities who have done very well by turning what some would see as a flaw into a positive trademark. Look at the long neck and the googly eyes of Anne Hathaway. Or there's the vampirish teeth of Ricky Gervais when he laughs. Or even the hunched, Yoda-like appearance of Pope Benedict. So why bother trying to fit ourselves into a standard pattern when genetics just don't work like that? Isn't it better to change our response instead? So whether we like it or not, caricature is a powerful force that we can't ignore. And it's a force for good, because it takes its shots in a harmless way. It's pencil marks on a page, it's brushstrokes on a canvas, and it lifts spirits. And in some cases, it transforms lives. And it gives us a new way of looking at ourselves. I, for one, am proud and honoured to be a part of that cause. So maybe I'm not such a bad person after all. Thank you.